Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Kathy Foch. I'm the chair of the Iowa County Democrats and a member of the Heart of Iowa Democrats founding team. Sharing the hosting duties tonight with the Iowa Women's Caucus. Before we start, just a few housekeeping items. We are well, no, we're not. Sorry. We're not live streaming to the Heart of Iowa Dems page tonight, but we are recording. And this will be put on the Heart of Iowa Dems Facebook page, as well as the Women's Caucus page later in the week. You can also view a transcript of this tonight by selecting live transcription on the toolbar. If you have a question this evening, drop it in the chat room. That's on the toolbar also for those of you that have never done a Zoom call before. We'll start with the questions that were submitted in advance, and then we will get to as many of the chat room questions as we can. And I know that Laura has a number of questions she wants to ask also. I will drop the Heart of Iowa Democrats email address into the chat room. And as soon as Mary Weaver from the Women's Caucus joins us, she will drop the contact point for the Women's Caucus in the chat room. Tonight, we've asked Laura Belin to moderate the conversation. Laura is the publisher, editor, and primary reporter for Bleeding Heartland, a community website focused on Iowa politics. She is also the State House reporter for KHOI Radio in Ames and co-host of the station's Capital Week program, as well as a member of the Iowa Writers Collaborative. You can receive her original reporting and commentary through the evening Heartland newsletter and links to her radio program and what she's been reading at her Substack on Iowa Politics with Laura Belin. I'll ask her to drop in some links later for all of you. I'm going to hand it off to Laura now, and she's going to introduce Senator Weiner and Representative Meyer.
Yeah, and I want to keep this brief because I want to hear as much as possible from the legislators about what they think about the session and some of their takeaways. But Senator Janice Weiner is the leader of the Iowa Senate Democrats. She's served in the upper chamber since 2023, representing a district that covers basically Iowa City and University Heights. Representative Brian Meyer is the new leader of the Iowa House Democrats. He has served he represents a district covering part of Des Moines. He's served in the legislature since a special election in 2013. But before that, he served on the Iowa House Democratic Caucus staff for 7 years, including the 4 years of the Democratic trifecta. So I'm going to just throw it to you. I hope you will both talk about your thoughts on the session and moving forward.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks for being here. Thanks to all of you who have tuned in. I think those of us who are in the legislature always really appreciate it when people pay attention, because I have the sense that often we operate in way too much of a bubble in Des Moines. We think maybe people pay attention, but either they don't have, they can't, they don't, for whatever reason. So really appreciate the attention to this. From my perspective, this was my first session leading the Senate Democrats, there was a huge amount of opportunity and an equal, if not greater, amount of disappointment. We could have done some really good things. We, even together with our Republican colleagues, Senate Democrats proposed legislation on a whole variety of issues that would have really addressed some of the pocketbook issues that Iowans have told us they're really concerned about. We proposed legislation, a number of bills on childcare to make it accessible and more affordable, on housing, to fix the employment safety net, on public schools, to adequately fund public schools, to help Iowans in nursing homes, to clean up our water, to increase worker wages, to address Iowa's ridiculously high cancer rate, a whole variety of things, and very little, if any, of that got done. There was a decent start with the governor's $1 million for cancer research being approved, but that's really a drop in the bucket. But we did pass some good bills for Iowans. We finally got cancer healthcare coverage expanded for firefighters. That was Senator Schultz had been blocking it last year. We got it across the finish line this year, though it could have been a better bill and included preventive testing. We created paid employment leave for state employees and adoptive parents. It's a little bit of a weird bill with different lengths of time, but we need to start somewhere, and we really had nothing before. We passed hands-free legislation, which was, I think, conversely had been blocked by someone in the House. So we got past that. That's a win, because hopefully it will save lives on the road. There was a big bill on disaster funding and recovery that got through that I think was very much needed. And we finally, I would be happy to talk more in detail about that, but we finally got the opioid settlement dollars out the door, albeit not in the way most of us would have liked to, but we finally got them out. So we did some good things, but not nearly enough. Some of the less positive things, a huge giveaway to corporations, $1 billion to corporations, largely at the expense of workers, with the Unemployment Trust Fund. Removed gender identity and a variety of protections from the Civil Rights Code, the very first state to remove protections from a Civil Rights Code. And when anybody says, well, you all pay too much attention to trans rights, my answer to them is, we are all children of God. We will fight for anyone's rights. And we have shown that we will stand up for bullies in whatever sphere. We underfunded public schools really, really quite to the point where nearly half of Iowa school districts are on budget guarantee, which means they could end up raising property taxes. And we saw what I believe is the beginning of the end of Medicaid expansion, among other things, such as Baby Olivia, and other stuff that this doesn't come to mind immediately. But I just keep thinking, and finally also in the Senate, which was a wild ride at the end, landowners finally got a debate on eminent domain and property rights. But there was lots of opportunity. Our Republican colleagues in the Senate seem to operate as if there are only 34 seats in the Senate, and finally got some lessons toward the end that maybe there are more. But that the session is behind us now. We want to get out and talk to Iowans all over the state. So glad you're here tonight. Over to you.
So I would echo what Janice said. I mean, here we had, every year we have an opportunity, and I always make fun of the fact that we have 110 days to do a budget, right? And they wait till day 114 to start negotiating the budget with the Senate. It's the most absurd thing I've ever seen. And it's been years that they've been doing this. I mean, it makes no sense. Why would you wait that long? Why would you not talk? I understand Senate, House, and all that stuff. Probably the wildest thing, Janice hit on it there at the end, was the eminent domain bill. And I'm being told by sources that she's going to veto that. And if she vetoes that, that is going to create havoc. But I would not doubt it. Sources are sources, or people are saying this and people are saying that. But there's a way that they could have made sure that was signed, and that is they could have held back budgets. Hold back something the governor wants. And they got very upset with us in the House when we talked about the eminent domain bill being fake. They pass a version in the House, they kick it over to the Senate changes it, and it just kind of volleys back and forth. Reality is, if they really wanted it, they could have gotten it and gotten it signed. They could have held something back the governor wanted, but they made these very bizarre decisions on timing for budgets, bizarre decisions based on, I don't think any of us understood. But again, Janice is right. We're in a bubble up there, right? And most people don't know the ins and outs and the plays that are being made. I will say that the most disturbing thing, obviously, was the transgender bill. Very, very disappointing, to say the least, after years of pushing back on it. And boy, when they want to move on something like that, they move like greased lightning, right?
Yep.
But then you can't get them to move on anything else. They sit around. And probably the most alarming, that's the most disappointing. The most alarming is we are in a fiscal cliff.
Yeah.
We are headed for a disaster financially in the state of Iowa. That huge deficit, $900 million that they're spending, those funds are only going to last so long. And at the end of the day, the thing that's going to bankrupt this state, among other things, is this the vouchers, the private school vouchers. So those are, I just wanted to add that to what kind of Janice had said. Obviously, I agree with everything Janice said. I think that we've worked really well with Senate Democrats to come up with a unified message, unified bills that we're going to propose. And I look forward to working with Janice and the Senate to do that again in the coming months to prepare for 2026. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
I mean, before we move forward, I just add a couple of things on the budget. You're absolutely right. We found out before session when Senator Peterson FOIA'd it that our Republican colleagues intend to continue to dig into reserves for the next 5 years. And they're not alarmed by it, despite the potential avalanche of bad financial news coming at us from Washington on Medicaid and SNAP, and we don't even know where that's going to go. I maintain that a lot of this started in COVID when everybody stopped because of COVID. They didn't have joint budget subcommittees with the Senate and the House. The House still does budget subcommittees, at least to some extent. The Senate, with one or two exceptions, never took that practice up again. And it has struck me as someone who has never literally in my legislative career participated in one of these subcommittees that if there were a process like that involved both the Senate and the House and the various departments and in some way the governor's office, that they would sort of move inexorably toward here's what we need, here's what we have, here's what this should look like. So let's actually come to agreed numbers rather than this last minute, figure this out when we're really at the 11th hour.
I agree that the failure to have a normal budget process is a huge issue, and it goes back to them getting rid of those joint budget subcommittees. I also wanted to say that I don't have any inside information, but there's no doubt in my mind the governor is going to veto that eminent domain bill. When has she ever done anything that Bruce Rastetter that would cause problems for him? Remember that Terry Branstad is a senior policy advisor to Summit Carbon Solutions. So I just can't see any scenario where she would sign that. But it certainly will make a lot of people very angry, especially in the House Republican caucus, if she vetoes it. So we're going to get to questions. I had a couple of quick questions. First of all, I'd like to hear from each of you about how is recruiting going for 2026 legislative candidates?
Go ahead, Janice.
We are about halfway there. I mean, it's a good 2026 is a good year for the Senate Democrats. We always have 25 seats up, right? But it's an offensive year. The only seat that's really defensive for us is the one we just flipped in January, the Mike Zimmer seat over in Clinton, Jackson, and Scott counties. Otherwise, none of the seats that we have up are going to be heavy lifts to defend. And we've recruited several candidates already, and I'm talking to a bunch of people, particularly right now in the Sioux City area, because unfortunately, I may not agree with everyone's politics, but I wouldn't wish anybody to end up with pancreatic cancer. Unfortunately, the Republican senator from Sioux City is very, very ill, and I suspect there likely will be another special election before we get to next fall. And that may not be the only one, but we're encouraged by where we are. We have about like 4 districts that are our target districts, and I think we've got candidates for at least 3 of them right now, as well as some other folks who have stepped up for a couple of the districts that we hadn't necessarily planned yet to target.
And to remind people, the Republican majority right now is 34 to 16. So flipping even 1 or 2 seats is really important.
Right.
In just the Senate, 1 seat would mean that the governor wouldn't be able to get all of her nominees confirmed without any Democratic support. So very important.
We flip 1 seat, we're out of the super minority.
Right. How's it going on that in the House recruiting?
It's going really well. With the announcement of Eddie Andrews running for governor, I think that creates a very good opportunity. And I did have an unnamed Republican lobbyist call me today saying, "Congratulations, you won your first seat." Oh, we're not saying that, but apparently the person that is going to run up there as a Moms for Liberty doesn't fit the district. And but you know, there's little things like that are encouraging when you see um some of these districts that are kind of marginal. We've got Heather Severs running again, probably over in Altoona. Talked to her today. We've got a great candidate or a few possible candidates up in Dubuque, the former Chuck Eisenhardt district. I think I'm going to head up there. Of course, I'm from Dubuque, but I'm going to head up there to meet with him next week. And Sean Bagneski and I are doing the recruiting. Mostly Sean's kind of keeping track of everything. And but you know, Molly Buck in Ankeny, I think is close to making a decision to run for the House again. We've got really great potential candidates like Molly or Heather and others across the state. So I feel really good. Midterm election, you know, I kind of view it like 2018, and it's way too early to even, you know, kind of consider what the dynamics are going to be. But it starts, like you said, Laura, with recruitment, and we're finding people are engaged. The woman that said people will die, she screamed that out. Indira May or India May up in Charles City and Chickasaw County in that area, you know, which we've had before. That was my friend Todd Pritchard's seat. And there's little things like that where um, as people are stepping up, you feel really good about your chances moving forward. And so we've gotten some really good recruits.
I want to give both, I'm going to jump to the participant questions in a second, but to give people some background. So the Republican representative, Eddie Andrews, who announced today that he's running for governor, he represents a district in the northwest suburbs of Des Moines. It's centered in Johnston. He was the only Republican in Iowa to win a legislative district in 2020 that Joe Biden carried. And then just this past year, he was the only Republican to win a legislative district that Kamala Harris carried. So that would be why the Representative Meyer's Republican source said, congratulations, you just won your seat. I mean, that will be a very difficult seat for Republicans to defend. So here, I'm just going to go through the list. These were submitted in advance. There was a question, there was confusion about what the governor did related to childcare and continuum of care. Are wraparound grants now dead? This was the bill, the governor's bill didn't get through. So she announced last week some sort of new grant program, but I don't, so if somebody can speak to what she did exactly and whether these wraparound grants are dead.
So my understanding is that because the bill didn't pass, then it had huge problems with it because it was just like moving, it was like a shell game with money. Well, and it was not ready in my view, in our view, it wasn't ready for prime time. She's digging into some of the 100 million that's been sitting there for childcare. She's not getting rid of any of the like 0 to 3 programs that we were really worried. Some of the community-based childcare programs that already exist that have been working well, which the bill would have axed in favor of starting new and producing. But she's putting some of the 100 million that's been sitting there unused into creating full day preschool for 4-year-olds with the wraparound piece. So I mean, we did keep pointing out on the floor that 100 million was there and why weren't they using it? And they're refunding some of the grants that had existed before. So that's my understanding. I think in the end, it's actually what she's doing is not a bad thing right now, and it's definitely better than passing the bill would have been. But the real expert, if you all want to know, is Tracy Ehlert in the House. She knows it all inside and out.
Yep.
And I called Tracy before this when I saw that question, and she didn't answer, but I did call a staffer, and that's definitely not my expertise. And Janice, I think you're 100% right. To answer the more specific question about wraparound services, no, those grants continue, and I think it is better than the bill. So it sounds like it's really, I mean, that's something that's good that obviously didn't pass, but is something good that the governor did. So
Yeah, at first I was worried that maybe she was trying to legislate without the legislature legislating, but in the end, it sounded like what she did was actually okay.
There's another question. How does the public stay aware of the impact on special education programs with the AEA program's disruption? And this is something I always try to tell people, send me tips if you know of something going on with the AEA in your area, because I think we have only just begun to see the impact. And in this second year, a lot more things are going to change with the AEA funding. So, but anyway, I'd like to hear how you would answer that question.
I mean, the AEs are getting more money cut from them, and more money is going to the school districts. The more rural and the smaller school districts were already hurting the first year in, but now they've taken away media services and a variety of other things. They haven't hired the number of people they said they were going to in the Department of Education. They have seemed to realize that the AEAs are needed, but they slashed funding in the budget, and I couldn't tell you to the tune of how much, but I was just when I heard the numbers at whatever o'clock in the morning it was, I thought, this is absurd. It's not the direction we should be going. You know, find something else to cut, help the kids.
Yeah, and it's completely bizarre to me that we have a situation, you know, I live in a school district that's the largest school district, obviously, in the state, but it doesn't impact us nearly as what it does, what an AEA is meant to do, which is create funding sources for rural community schools. And that's where your impact is.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand why these people, these legislators, they just keep poking these rural communities like this. And it's just very bizarre to me that nobody ever calls them out on it. And I think to go to the broader question, which was how do you keep up with it? You know, AEAs are, it's kind of like ed, we call them ed heads in the legislature, the people that are really, really into legislation regarding education and stuff. And those are the people that know this stuff. But does the broader community know how to track that down and keep track of it and what's happening at the legislature, what's happening in your local AEAs? I think you just have to watch. You have to keep a keen eye out for what your local AEA is doing as a reaction to what the state has done over the past couple of years. And a lot of these things that they do, they don't have an immediate impact. It's a slow death by 1,000 cuts on the state budget. They are trying to starve government, period, end of statement. And then they'll let the next legislature try and figure it out, right? They don't believe in government. So AEAs are just another form of government that they would just soon see wither on the vine. And so that's very disappointing, but it's really the rural communities that are going to get hurt. So.
It is so
And I think
bizarre. I mean, Senator Chuck Grassley, when he was in the legislature, was one of the creators of the AEA system to
he
help
helped create
rural school districts.
So everybody would have access. You know, that hated word now in Washington, it's equitable. So everybody would have access, and everybody would be able to afford it. I think the group that's most at risk right now is the really young kids. Mm-hmm. And the funding for the stuff that starts almost in the hospital and when they get home for kids who really need the services, which of course pays back multifold down the line as they get the services they need when they're really young, so that they can then start school in much better shape. So I have a friend whose kindergartner has an IEP, an individual education plan, and she's individual. She's like, it's going great now, but will it be there in a year or two? And they're really worried, and they have every right to be.
There's a question about to discuss changes in voting rules and the impact on voters. The governor just signed 2 election bills on Monday. Would you both be willing to talk about those?
Well, the piece that was, I mean, they were sort of changing. I think Secretary Pate wanted to make sure that the recount rules were sorted out so that they were apparent, that everybody knew what they were going to be doing. But to me, the most disturbing part about what was changed has to do with immigration status and the ability for poll workers who really know nothing about this, sort of somehow empowering them to ask people for immigration documents or about their immigration status, which to me is just it's a setup in some places for profiling, but a lot of poll workers, and I've been a poll worker a number of times, it's like, we don't want to touch that. That's not our job. We have enough work to do with our job. But the politicization of the immigration piece and essentially creating that potential to intimidate voters is what really worries me the most about this bill, or one of these bills. Brian?
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see from a legal standpoint, being an attorney, who has standing in terms of, I don't think anybody's able to challenge it now, but if somebody's vote's taken away because a poll worker challenged somebody's immigration status, that's just really bizarre to me, just from a standpoint of equal protection under the law, and who has the ability to vote without hassle, right? And I think we've seen a lot of that lately with in the last couple of years. They want to make impediments to voting because they know the fewer people that vote, they win. If people vote, we win. If people don't vote, they stay home in certain areas of the state, they're going to win. So they have no interest in early balloting. They have, and that's from years ago when they did that. But they have no interest in helping people vote. They have an interest in suppressing the vote.
And we saw this whole circus last fall in the final weeks, last couple of weeks before the election, where, and then there was a performative lawsuit that Pate and Byrd filed as well. The fact is that Secretary Pate could have gotten access to all the information he was seeking if he'd signed a memorandum of understanding at that point with DHS, that was at that time under the Biden administration. There's a process called SAVE, which would have allowed him access to people's most up-to-date immigration status. He apparently assigned it now, but refused to do it under the previous administration. And that's an actual accurate resource for if there are any doubts, than having a poll worker say, "Are you a citizen?"
Right. I mean, it's just begging for racial profiling. Absolutely. Racial and ethnic profiling. So, there was a question submitted by one of your colleagues. Why did legislative Democrats only propose 5% increase in the per pupil funding for K through 12 schools when the state has fallen almost 10% behind inflation since Kim Reynolds took over?
Well, that's one of my colleagues, so I'll take the question if that's okay, Brian. It's like,
Please.
So it's true that for 9 years, so going on a decade, Republicans have underfunded Iowa schools, but you can't make up for a full decade of underfunding and not keeping up with inflation in 1 year, especially looking at the budget imperatives that we were facing this year. We were trying really hard to legislate, or at least propose responsible legislation that wouldn't further blow up the budget. So vouchers, the private school vouchers are estimated to cost about $315 million the next fiscal year. And so Democrats in the House and Senate agreed that we would propose a 5% increase in public school funding, which would approximately equal the cost of vouchers in this coming year. So it's sort of a wash. And compare that to the Republicans' 2% proposal that ended up passing and putting almost half of Iowa school districts in budget guarantee. And remember that, as Brian said, that the budget that our Republican colleagues passed already spends $917 million more than the state's taking in.
The next question was, why are state and national leaders failing to highlight Joni Ernst's callous "we all are going to die" remark? I would have to say I've seen a lot of Democrats are highlighting it, but anyway, can you talk about what you've done to highlight it and how you think that may play into next year's campaigns?
You want to take this one first, Brian?
Well, look, I mean, it was one of our candidates that did it. She's out there promoting it, talking about it. JD Scholten, our wonderful state representative from Sioux City, who I'm very angry with right now. Just kidding. That he's not running again because I really think he's such a great asset to our caucus. But he is running. He made that decision, I think, earlier than what he had anticipated to throw his hat in the ring, and highlighted that, obviously, that he was promoting that statement as the reason why he got in this early. I think he always kind of was leaning that way, but he called me over the weekend and said, "Hey, I think I'm going to jump in this week." So very proud of him, very happy for him. Obviously, I think he's a great candidate, and I know there's others out there, but he's the guy that's promoting it. Ms. May that made the statements promoting. I've seen a lot of our members highlighting it.
Yeah, there's been I've seen I put out some of my own social media on it. The Senate Democrats and the Senate Majority Fund have put some out. The Iowa Democratic Party has put out a fair amount on it, as well as those who are highlighting what they're writing. And it's what struck me is how it seems to have struck a nerve, both the original statement and the somewhat snarky supposed apology video that came afterwards. It seems to have struck a national nerve. Everywhere from national news shows to the New York Times and the Washington Post and a variety of others, it seems, and as well as Reagan, our very own Reagan, of course. You can't get away from it. And it reminds me that it was like Marionette Miller Meeks did this thing running away from someone trying to ask her about Social Security like 10 days ago. I thought, well, this is going to be all over TV. All the way up through the 2026 election. And then Joni Ernst said, "Hold my beer."
Right. Yeah, it's true that Miller Meeks, we are going to see that video of her running away from the guy asking about Medicaid. But yes, that was
right. But
that was wild.
Yeah, this seems to be doubling down, and now both have confirmed that they're running for re-election. And so I can really only assume it's going to continue to be out there. Everybody keeps talking about it, Colbert, serious news stations, MSNBC. I presume I have to admit, I don't usually watch Fox. So I don't know if it's made it onto Fox, but lots of people who don't normally pay attention to politics have been popping up in my inbox and friends' inbox that, "Did you see this?" Like, yes, how could we avoid it? It's in our faces all the time. And what really struck me, honestly, was I think she could, as Brian said, I think she could have made a simple apology, said, there are a lot of people yelling at me. I got sort of flustered, sorry, and just moved on. And it probably would not have been the huge story that it's been, but for that second very carefully considered video, which was no accident when you film it in front of a cemetery and decide to mention somehow the Tooth Fairy and Jesus Christ. I don't know. It's a choice.
Well, and I'll just add one thing to that. And somebody asked me about why she would do that. And I said, you have to understand how Iowa Republicans think. It's the arrogance that they believe they cannot lose.
Mm-hmm.
No normal politician that had any concern about their reelection would have done that. This is the arrogance of them being in a red state, what they perceive as a red state. I would say is probably going to move a little bit more purple. I don't think she really cared. I think the joke was on us, right? Mm-hmm. She knew what she was doing. I mean, come on, that was not. I wouldn't even call that an apology.
It wasn't. It was deliberate.
It was deliberate.
Yeah, she's more concerned about acting like Trump. That was kind of the Trumpification of politics, the in-your-face thing. Yeah. I'm just going to say something even more offensive.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just looking to see if I missed any questions. Yeah, there are people, a lot of concern about Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. And I think people are wondering, what can they do other than calling and emailing Grassley's and Ernst's office? I mean, how can people try to weigh in on this reconciliation bill this summer?
I mean, obviously that's different. That may be a different level of government. But one of the things that we were juggling all year in the legislature this year, which I haven't seen before, is how do we deal with federal issues when we're state legislators, because they're coming at us like through a fire hose at the same time as we're supposed to be here working for Iowans. So our approach, at least in the state Senate, was to figure out ways that these were going to impact Iowans and to highlight those. So we get the people who are out there, have been out there collecting stories of Iowans, their Medicaid stories, their VA stories, their SNAP stories, the food bank stories, it's hard to know what if anything is going to break through, but you can never give up. And my prime example of that was actually the end of, not this past session, but the previous session in the legislature, where we got the Boy Scout bill through at the very last minute. And the reason that happened, and I don't know exactly how Speaker Grassley got pressure to finally bring it up, but the reason it happened in the Senate was we finally found someone in Senator Kreinbrink's district who'd been directly affected. And he contacted Senator Kreinbrink. And that convinced Senator Kreinbrink from one of the budget committees that we had to get this done. And so by the time it came to a vote in the Senate, uncharacteristically for something like that, it was unanimous. It got crafted narrowly enough so it was like, and then it was this full court press, not just by the Senate Democrats, but also by our Republican colleagues in the Senate to get it in front, to get a vote on the House floor in a timely manner before the session ended. And in the end, we had to vote on it again because they added something in the House, but we did, and the governor got it signed in time. So all of which is to say, got to keep telling the stories and keep putting them in front of Ernst and Grassley. And this bill's going to change, so it'll go back to the House and in front of our various representatives, because we may end up eventually with the ones that break through.
Yeah, and I'll add to what Janice said, which is the cuts on the national level are simply a condition precedent to, and she mentioned this earlier, to really repealing the expansion of Medicaid, which is just commonly known as Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. All that really is an expansion of Medicaid. And the most interesting part about that is that these other states that are doing that, they're just a little bit ahead of Iowa. And really again, that affects essentially rural hospitals, right? And in the course of the next 5 to 10 years, you'll see these cuts come into play. And on a state level, because obviously we have to fund on a match the Medicaid dollars, right? So that really is what's going to cause a lot of people in the state to lose health insurance, but additionally for rural hospitals to really be squeezed. And I think, again, it's an example of Iowa Republicans going after their own constituents, among other things. But and so how can we fight it? We have to fight Medicaid on the state level. But obviously what everybody else said, contact your legislators on the national level. But man, it's going to be a mess here in the next couple of years.
Yeah. And one of the crazy things about the debate, because there was a bill that our Republican colleagues passed about work requirements, or sort of additional requirements for Medicaid, right? We never got any fiscal data on it, which, to the average person, what does that matter? It matters. We want to know, if something passes, what's the cost going to be to implement it? And will the savings be greater than the costs? And Legislative Services Agency, the nonpartisan group that writes the bills for us and looks up this stuff, asked Health and Human Services several times. They couldn't get an answer. Some of my colleagues asked them several times. They couldn't get an answer either. So the only data we had was from Arkansas and Georgia. In both places, it was a disaster.
Kathy had a question in the chat about how can people help recruit candidates in their areas if they live in an area that, maybe you haven't had a candidate in the past, or you don't have a declared candidate.
So what's your approach, Brian? What do you suggest?
Well, look, always looking for candidates all over the state. And for the most part, we're gonna have areas where we think that are great seats that we can pick up. But I have seen over the course of my 20 years at the Capitol, I remember, I think it was 2012 when Obama was on the ticket, and all of a sudden it just was, we were electing people, we had no idea who some of these people were. I mean, because they weren't really a targeted seat necessarily, but if the stars and the moon align, people can get elected in some of these places. And people like India May, I'll mention her again, where she can create havoc for Charlie Thompson, keep him at home, cause him to um, stay home, spend his money at home, and if the conditions are right, we've had a Democrat there before, and she's the kind of person that's feisty enough to really kind of bite into any comfort that he may think he has in that area, because she's really smart and aggressive. And I'm using her as an example, but you never know when lightning's going to strike in some of these areas. So we are always down for people giving us recommendations on candidates.
Yeah, tell Brian, tell me, tell your county chair of your county party. Even like one of our best, we have a lot of people who are coming out of the world of education. School board presidents, people who've been principals and so forth. And that seems to be, not surprisingly, given the atmosphere surrounding education right now, they are really committed. Once they throw their hat in, they're really committed. So if you find people, have them reach out to us, have them reach out to their county chair, because we're on the phone. And one of the first people I call when I'm calling around in areas, the various county chairs. Sometimes I call people on local government, depending on who they are, supervisors or school board members. So there's, and often it's who do you know? Not necessarily do you want to run, but who do you know who might want to run?
I'm just looking to see if there were any more. It says, okay, Judd Lawler said in his newsletter that more than 100,000 people in Iowa are on Medicaid but not working. How many of them are exempt from work requirements? Are there really a lot of able-bodied people on Medicaid who can and should be working? My understanding, that is a number that the governor's office threw out, and I never saw. I tried to get justification. I know I talked to Representative Beth Wessel-Krischel about it. She couldn't get the details on that. She felt that that was a very misleading number that the governor's office was putting out. There are about 600,000 Iowans on Medicaid. That includes a lot of seniors and children. But so I'd be very surprised. But yeah, that is a talking point we're hearing from House House and Senate Republicans. What can you say about that one?
It's a nice round number. I mean, they have no idea. It's ridiculous. I mean, number one, they have no idea. Number two, most of your Medicaid is nursing homes. It's kids. It's people that are just so indigent. There's no way they can work 40 hours a month. There's just no way that this is going to work. It just is absurd.
And I know a lot of people pointed out that so many people are already working full time, but they're working at places like Walmart where they don't have benefits and they're not paid a living wage. That's why they're on Medicaid.
Yeah, why don't we pass a law that says if you're employed, you get health insurance? Problem solved, right?
Right. So I mean, part of this whole mess that we continue to deal with, why the history goes all the way back to World War II, where it's like nobody else does insurance the way we do it in the U.S. And it has to do with a system that was set up in World War II and never fixed afterwards. But a lot of people, when the statistics I've heard is that at least 70% of people are working. There are people who can't get the hours, who for whatever reason can't get to work at a certain time. So it's basically a gotcha because of the paperwork and the reporting that's required, and the Arkansas was really an object lesson on this. But and despite that, both here in Iowa and at the federal level, they want to do it. So it's and what the other place that it will continue to hit is, as Brian said, rural hustles, but any remaining birthing centers that are anywhere that's not in a big city, because that's expensive. It's not really, it's barely, and a large portion of births in Iowa are covered by Medicaid. And
Well, you know,
put huge burdens on the larger hospitals in Des Moines, in Iowa City, and so forth, because the waits at emergency at ERs are already ridiculous.
you know, so they use these tropes a lot of times on for different bills. So if you all remember tort reform, it was the trial lawyer's fault because all of the burden. You can't have a baby in rural Iowa anymore. It has nothing to do with the fact that we're cutting services and nobody lives in Wayne County anymore, but it's the trial lawyer's fault. So they just kind of recycle these things depending on the bill that's in front of them.
Yeah. And then, I mean, the one piece that was positive, the Senate Republicans stripped from the bill. There was supposed to be a study on Josh Turek's Work Without Worry that would actually allow people who with a disability who want to work more to be able to work more without risking losing their Medicaid, because they need the services and literally basically to survive. And the Senate Republicans inexplicably like, no, it's sort of a like, we don't want to know. Say, let's just not even find out, because we don't want to know the answer.
And the House floor manager said when that bill came back to the House, he said, well, he talked to Kelly Garcia, the director of the Department of Health and Human Services, and she assured him that she is going to look into this. So I immediately emailed the communications staff for HHS and said, is there really going to be a study? And they said yes. And I said, well, is there going to be a report that's published that people can see what the findings are? And it was like, no response. So I don't know what kind of review, what kind of internal review is going to happen, but it's not going to be like what was in the original House bill where they had to do a study and it was going to be reported to the legislature by X date.
Right, but there's just the irony, like that was something that was going to encourage work,
right,
and allow for more work.
So, okay, there's a question in the chat. Tell us what to do. No King's Day. ACLU sent an email promoting June 14th as No King's Day. Is this a thing? Tell us what to do now in the moment. There are going to be a lot of events on June 14th to protest. That's the day that it's Trump's birthday, and it's the day he's going to have the big Soviet-style military parade.
It's the 250th. It's the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army, also, which is what's occasioning. Yeah, there are protests all over. I was talking before this started. I was talking with Kathy about what they're doing in Williamsburg. The 505, whatever it is, the movement that's been organizing all these protests has maps out on social media. That the place is blanketed. I don't know all of them, but they are. I think showing up will be key. One of the other interesting things that's happening on the 14th with the new American Pope, or now the new Pope Leo the 14th, he's doing a mass in Kaminsky Park via like essentially via Zoom or whatever that afternoon. That seems also intentional.
I would say write letters to the editor. People read those things. I mean, and especially in the rural newspapers, I think that's helpful. I mean, and share things with your contacts, because like the algorithm often makes it hard to get information and political news out. It's better if you share it directly with people you know. They're more likely to see it than through the algorithm. But I think letters, keep them short and fact-based, research-based, or personal stories. But I feel like that's effective. But I think showing up at the protests is helpful? What do you think?
I think it's helpful for a variety of reasons. It's really, since this all started, one of the things that struck me is the real need to build community and to support each other. And one thing that protests do is they really reinforce that and build community, allow some people to come out who maybe don't want to talk, don't otherwise have a voice. You know, some of you've seen the signs that have popped up at some protests. You know, this is so serious that even the introverts, that I'm an introvert and even I'm out protesting.
Right.
It's
fascinating. Yeah, what's fascinating to me is that I've gotten the sense a little bit of sort of anti-Trump fatigue in terms of like, here we go again. A lot of the people and we saw a lot more of protests and that sort of thing in 2017 because I think of the shock value of Trump, but people have kind of settled into that. And what I'm concerned about is people getting too comfortable with the weirdness and the absurdity of the Trump administration. And, you know, I appreciate yeah, the conversation about and I know Laura is a student of the you know, Soviet Union and what an absurdity it is that we're having a parade that is generally reserved, military parade that's generally reserved for those uh, uh, Cold War era Soviet bloc dictatorships. But it's really bizarre to me that we're having this parade and kind of just, and people are just okay, you know, they're not okay with it, but yeah, anywhere you can go out there and protest. But I have noticed kind of a fall off and people are getting a little more comfortable with the absurdity of this administration compared to like 2017. And hopefully we can energize people a little bit.
I think it's helpful to remember that not everyone has to do the same thing. So some people are not able to or don't feel comfortable going out to a protest, but that's why I said, you know, write a letter to the editor. I
Right.
know I wrote years ago, I wrote something about the Urbandale Democrats and their neighbor to neighbor program. And I went out and watched them getting ready for a day when a lot of people were hitting the doors. And it was like, not everyone can or wants to go knock doors, but some people were stuffing packets. Some people were preparing walk lists. Some people were writing thank you note postcards. I mean, it's just, there are so many different things that people can do to help. I mean, and get connected with your county party to find out maybe there's a summer festival in your area that they need help, somebody with tabling to try to get people registered to vote or get people connected. I don't know. It just seems like there are a lot of things that can meet different people's ability and comfort level.
Yeah, everybody can only do what they can do, but I mean, it's like sort of adding pebbles to a pile. Everything adds up.
I'm looking to see if there's nokings.org. There's a map with a lot of the No Kings events, but I've seen a bunch of people talking about it on Facebook. So, and or, you know, in other places. So, okay, there's a question here. To flip the chambers, you have to take back rural seats. What are your plans to help rural and non-competitive areas build infrastructure and capacity to do this?
Well, the first step is to recruit great candidates. And I think that one of the things that I'm focused on and kind of ran on to become leader was we have these smaller industrial towns like Marshalltown, Newton, and Ottumwa, and Fort Dodge, and places like that. And I will never give up on that. I think there's opportunities there. And I think at the end of the day, the river towns, Burlington, Keokuk, Dubuque now, Clinton, these are places where we've traditionally had success. And I think having been around 20 years, worked on staff, seeing the ebb and flow in politics, I will never give up. Keep pounding the pavement, keep doing what you need to do, but it starts with great candidates in these areas. And I think we're somewhat hampered by a very difficult situation on the national level in the way Democrats are perceived. And everything that I've seen is going to be a challenge. But certainly the first step is recruiting great candidates that can get the message out.
We're going out and doing listening posts all over the state, and they're truly listening posts, because I can't tell, it's one of the things that we've heard regularly is it sounds like some Democrats talk down to others, or it's like, no, I'm not going to talk. I want to hear what you need in your community and what you want us to focus on. But as I said at the very beginning, the main focus is going to be on pocketbook issues and public schools, because that's what we want people to be able to live where they want to live in Iowa, live the kind of life they want to live. And be able to earn a decent wage and have good schools and all the rest of that, whether they live in Urbandale or Iowa City or Ottumwa or Decorah or wherever they live. They should be able to do that. And that's not the case anymore. So we're doing a lot of listening posts. I agree with Laura on the letters to the editor, because the local media, the small town media has really degraded through no fault of their own over the years. You have Lee and Gannett that have come in and taken over a lot of papers. The number of reporters, the number of papers, the number of papers that are actually published on a regular basis, and yet they're still looking for content. We're trying to get out and start getting out on AM radio. We're looking to get out on more podcasts, and we've also the Senate Dems have now done sort of a county party engagement guide that we're sending out to parties on ideas that they can use to sort of get out in their communities and show people that, like, they're good people. They're just your neighbors.
Mm-hmm. Well, the time, boy, it sure went fast. I think I need to throw it back to Kathy, but thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for all the good questions. And yeah, thanks for spending part of your evening with us.
I want to thank all of you, Janice, Brian, and Laura, for joining us this evening. That was a great conversation. I also want to thank Karen Patel, who's in the background doing the recording for us. A reminder that the recording of this event will be available on the Heart of Iowa Facebook page, as well as the Women's Caucus Facebook page, maybe by around Friday. And I'll send you out an email with links to both of those two when it's up and running. We will be having a Heart of Iowa forum. Next one will be on Wednesday, July 2nd. Don't know who it's going to be yet, but there's no shortage of topics. And I'm going to throw it to Mary if she has anything she wants to advertise for the Women's Caucus.
I do. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, panelists and Laura. We are having our third Thursday informational educational meeting June 19th. Trip Nairn, who has served as a treasurer for a candidate, who has served as a county treasurer, who has served as a district treasurer, is going to talk with us real frankly and real plainly about it doesn't have to be scary to be a treasurer, and lots of times that's an impediment for people as they start to run for office. So it should be a good, helpful session as we encourage women and others to run for office. So June 19th, we'll start to do the marketing tomorrow and Friday.
That's great. I just want to close this evening by saying donate where you can. Iowa Democratic Party, your county Democratic Party, almost everybody has an ActBlue account, and or to any of your candidates that are running as much as you can. That's money, of course, but donate your time in any way, shape, or form. That's all for tonight. Thanks for keeping our series going, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for having us.